Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the question of the day for Thursday, April 2nd. We're continuing our discussion of Jude, and we're going to look at verse 4 today. This is an incredibly important verse because in it, Jude introduces us to the false teachers that he really spends the rest of the letter talking about, and he describes them here in four ways. He says that they're stealthy. They've kind of snuck into the church. He says that they're ungodly. That is, that they don't show any reverence to God. They do not care about his standards. They also have turned the grace of God into licentiousness, and by doing that, they have denied that Jesus is their Lord and their Master. And I want to spend a couple minutes today exploring this idea of turning grace into licentiousness. And really, what they were saying was that, hey, this gospel tells me that Jesus came and died and rose again so that the penalty for my sin was paid and that I stand before God as holy and righteous and blameless and without sin, judicially in that sense. And so, because that's true, I can go on living however I want because my debt is paid. And what we want to explore is why that's not a true reality, right? And that's very simple, but I think they failed to recognize that grace, though it is God's mercy and is applied to all of our lives, does not change God's standards for his people. God still expects his people to be holy. And these false teachers were missing the idea that grace does not give them the ability to pursue sin. Rather, grace is God's divine enablement so that they could be holy. And that's really how holiness and grace work, right? God has this standard of holiness, but he doesn't leave us out here to pursue that under our own strength. Rather, by his Spirit and divine enablement of grace, we can be holy. And so today's questions are focused on that reality. I want you first to maybe just share a time, if you're comfortable, when you failed to live by grace, when you maybe said to yourself, you know what, God's going to forgive me, so I'm going to do this because it feels good. I think we've all done that, and if you're comfortable, it can be powerful to share one of those types of testimonies. But the big thing that I want you to spend a few minutes thinking about is really helping to identify weaknesses. I think that as humans, we have a tendency to either go one direction or the other. We either want to emphasize freedom and God's gracious character, or we want to emphasize God's rules and standards and expectations of holiness, and we tend over here toward legalism. And I would just like you to share with the group, which one of those two do you kind of tend more towards? Do you find yourself saying, God's going to be so upset at me, I need to follow these rules, da 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 da. Do you tend toward legalism? Or do you say, oh, you know what, God doesn't really care, I'm going to do whatever I want, he's going to forgive me? And do you tend toward license and the ability to sin and do what you want? You know, it's helpful for us to recognize in both of those cases that the answer is God's grace through the Holy Spirit and through the Word as they work in our hearts to make us more like Jesus. I hope that your discussions about grace and holiness this week spur you on to be more like Christ. We will be praying toward that end.